This is a Hope 1032 podcast.
Hello, welcome to Undistracted. I'm your host, Laura Bennett, and this is the podcast where we learn from our guests how to be better at building our lives with intention around our passions, our purpose, and deal with some of the things that get in the way of that. You can subscribe wherever you're listening, rate, review this podcast. I'd love to hear what you think as well. You can always email undistracted@hope1032.com.au or reach out to me on Instagram at laura.bennett_. Today's guest is Jessica Kate. She's a local Queenslander who has written a book called Why Are All My Boyfriends Fictional? If you're in a single season of life, especially if you've never been married, it's something that you aspire to, but it just doesn't seem to be happening. Jessica talks about some of the ins and outs of a single lifestyle, the judgment and all of the different taboos that you can encounter, but also how you move forward in your single life with the joy that is absolutely possible and available to you there from a Christian perspective. I want to start with what really shaped your understanding of what dating, marriage would look like as a young girl. What was the biggest influence to your ideas around that?
I think to a big degree, we kind of just absorb what's around us. And so I grew up in a very rural area on farms. My family is all Christian. And at the time, there was sort of a big push for everybody to be quite conservative with dating, and the whole I Kiss Dating Goodbye movement, all that sort of thing was kind of floating around in the ether while I was growing up.
What kind of impact do you think that had on your approach to dating as a teenager? Did you date much as a teen?
I did date, surprisingly, because I'm not the most natural person at it, but I did have a couple of boyfriends. But I think it just kind of was a part of the expectation that you sort of expected that you definitely would get married, and that it was very unusual not to. And it was kind of spoken about in these hushed tones if someone had not married by the age of 30. And so you kind of had this thing loom in the future of, oh no, what if I become one of those people? And that's really not the healthiest way to look at it.
Do you remember when you first sort of felt that awareness of singleness could be viewed as something that was a problem, this issue to be solved?
Yeah, pretty much from the get-go. It was something that, because I really wanted to marry, I just always had this fear that I wouldn't get what I wanted. And so that's definitely a thing that I think a lot of people have that in different areas. And it's not that God is going to give you everything you want, but that's also assuming you're doomed is not the right attitude either. They're both not a position of trust.
No, and the good thing is about your book, you're really helping people deal with how to address some of those beliefs that we can have, how they form, what we do with them once they present themselves. In the title itself, thinking about why all our boyfriends may be fictional, do you think that we sometimes are a little bit maybe over-interested in the romanticized idea of love and these fictional ideas of what love could look like? Does that disrupt our ability to have a genuine, real world, real life relationship with somebody?
Oh, look, there's such a wide area at the moment of looking at, because it's such a global trend about couples are getting together less, and there's so many different factors coming into that. And certainly for some people, it can be one that, they've got this picture in their mind that they're not willing to necessarily let go of, and have a look at maybe what is there in front of them, or different ways that they might go out and try to meet someone. But the book is more kind of about taking you from that spot of feeling like maybe you're a victim of your singleness to becoming really a warrior for your joy with God.
There's almost a trend these days as well to have a pride in singleness. I don't know if you saw the article about how it's embarrassing to have a boyfriend now because you're meant to be able to show that you can be so independent and you don't need, love or companionship. It's interesting that we've almost switched to, or the pendulum has swung kind of the opposite way from encouraging coupling to almost discouraging it completely.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's it. People, there's 1,000 ways to be wrong, isn't there? And you can find people on both extremes. And historically, we normally go the other way. So it is weird now seeing that pendulum swing, but neither of them are really the way that we were built to, operate with relationships.
I feel like you could kind of end up a little bit lonely either way. But I also find it really interesting that day one of your book starts with this question of, are you free? Why is that an important place to begin?
It is really the central concept to the whole book because singleness can lead to so much discouragement for some women. And that discouragement is, that's the opposite of freedom. You're not free when you're feeling discouraged. You're getting bound up in these things, and it's not the way that you are going to be best operating and relating to God and yourself. And so it's really about looking at what are these things that I'm believing and that I've agreed with that are holding me back and setting us free into what God has for us. Because he talks a lot about offering spiritual freedom and light burdens and things like that, and peace and joy for the people who are following him. So if you're following him and you're not experiencing those things, it means that something's holding you back, and you're probably letting it hold you back in some way that you haven't recognized yet. So the first step is really recognizing that, what, if I'm believing in God, then feeling a sense of constant discouragement, like many people do, is not a normal thing that I should just sit and let be the normal status in my life.
You also talk about the need for us, if you're single, to not just, quote unquote, accept God's plan for your life or that reality, but to take pride in it. How do you move from that place of perhaps, I guess I better just, this is what's going to be, to actually finding a sense of pride and joy in it?
Yeah, well, when you think about the fact that the God of the universe knows who you are and has a plan for your life, Psalm tells us that he has each of the days of our life written in his book. So maybe it's not what you had planned or wanted. And if there's something to grieve in that, then that's okay to grieve that unmet expectation. But it is still such an unbelievable honor that God has a plan for us, and that the Bible does promise that whatever happens for whatever reason, he will find a way to use it for good. And if we could just sort of sit and marinate in how exciting it is that he is working for us in that way. And, it says that he himself prays for us to himself. Like, sometimes I like to sit and think, what's God praying for me today? It's really fun. And I think, what, there are things to grieve sometimes, or disappointments, but there's such a wonderful thing that if we just sort of sat there and pondered that for a while, we would realize how loved and encouraged we are, and that there is a lot to take pride in as well. It's really accepting whatever his will is.
I'm glad you acknowledged the grief in that, though, because for a lot of people, particularly if you're somebody that's grown up in a Christian framework, already in life, there's that predisposition for people to have to look for the silver lining and, glass half full, all of that. I think even more so sometimes in the Christian world, because we have to have a sense of acceptance of, well, it's, God's plan. And that can be a way of phrasing things that doesn't acknowledge the fact that there can be real pain and real grief for people who thought that God was going to do something a particular way, or that God was going to make their life look a particular way, whatever it might be. There can be a real sadness going, I got that wrong on this occasion.
Yep, that's real, and it needs to be processed in a healthy way. And there's nothing in the Bible that says that you shouldn't ever feel sadness or grief. Joy and sadness don't cancel each other out. Often we think of them as opposites that extinguish one another. But the truth is that you can hold both things at the same time. So when the Bible, in fact, talks about joy, it's not saying that we're denying or pushing down anything that's triggering some sadness in our lives. It's just saying that don't let that sadness mean that you don't reach out for the joy that's in front of you as well, because you may be feeling that, but you could also be feeling this. So don't miss that opportunity.
We probably also need a re-understanding of this whole concept of waiting, which I realize causes you a little bit of, what's the word? The propensity to have a rant at that word at times in the book too. Because what are we waiting for? Is singleness a kind of waiting?
Well, that's it. Like, if you think about how we talk about any life stage, We don't talk about anyone else as waiting in the way that we talk about singles. We don't say that teenagers are waiting to grow up. We don't say that young marrieds are waiting to have a baby. We think, oh, they're enjoying the life stage they're in now and they'll get to the next one when they're ready. And singles, it's the same. And, a person, if you talk about it being waiting, then you're really assuming that they will marry at some point. So if someone doesn't marry, you kind of saying that they're in this state of perpetual waiting. And that's awful. I just don't think that is the way that God looks at it either. So he tells us not to worry about tomorrow. He tells us to focus on what he's doing today. And so I think that just saying, look, I'm single today and I'm going to thank God for the good parts of it and bring the hard parts of it to him is just such a more encouraging way for singles to look at it ourselves, and just a bit of a healthier way for everyone else to frame it too.
And if we always see ourselves in this position of waiting, it can make us feel like it's always like we're sort of always never there yet in life, like not even toward marriage necessarily. But I wonder if there's a risk of being detached from our present kind of life if we're constantly thinking that there's this other version with, more purpose or more intention, whatever, coming next. Because all of that sort of language is used around marriage, that it's almost this more purposeful time of life.
Yep. And if you read what the Bible actually says about singleness, you'll realize that that's not how God views it at all. He sees tremendous meaning in either lifestyle, and they're both beautiful pictures of relating to him. So, yeah.
It's also really easy in the single window, and you address this in the book about how we can see it as almost proof of something else. If I'm single, I'm unlovable. If I'm single, I'm unattractive. If I'm single, God's forgotten me. You pick the thing, right? What are some of those that you've had to deal with in this journey?
I think the first one that you said, me being single means that I'm not lovable. That was something that really gave me a lot of pain for a long time. And it wasn't just singleness, I would find evidence for it in other areas of my life as well. And that is what made the singleness hurt so much more. I had a lot of good things about singleness that I was enjoying. It's not like every part of my life was triggering that, but because I used it as evidence for this painful belief about myself, it made it so much worse. And the big thing that really led to the book was this journey that God took me on of identifying those kinds of lies and finding out how to get rid of them and how to replace them with his truth. Because most people have a few different lies like that in their lives that they're dealing with and they're hobbling along with. But if we can learn how to get rid of them and replace them with truth, like I said, you're just stepping into a freedom that you've never known before.
What did you do to address them? Is it looking for scriptures that sort of contradict what you're feeling, or is it something more than that?
Look, it's a real combination of things. Some of it is certainly like, truths from the Bible, verses, prayers. Those are all really important spiritual foundations. But it's also a holistic approach where, we're not just a spirit, we are also emotions, we're also a physical body. And so throughout the book, I talk about a whole variety of techniques that I use to address all of those things. If you're having a bad day, maybe you actually need to go out for a run. Maybe singleness is not actually what's bothering you right now. You're just bored at work and you haven't exercised today, and your brain has just defaulted to, oh, I'm going to blame this discontentment I feel right now on singleness. So there's a lot of different habits around things that you can do that will cheer you up in the moment, but also healthy habits like really intentional gratitude, writing down 3 wins that you have every day. Those lay the foundation to grow joy slowly throughout your life. These habits reap fruit over time.
And I love what I read. One of the contributors to the book that you highlighted spoke about bringing a little bit of a perfect day into every day. So if your ideal day is sitting in a bookshop with a cup of coffee, reading whatever, if it's going for a run, if it's time with family, pull something that adds a bit of perfection into each day. That sounds like a lovely idea to me.
It's beautiful. That's it. God says that joy is one of the fruits of the Spirit. So why not do these things that put more joy into our lives.
The difficult thing with singleness, though, which you've touched on a little bit, is that we don't know if that season will end. For people who are single, you have no idea if one day you're going to meet the person. You have no idea if you're going to be single for life. It is this constant sense of expectation mixed with acceptance and patience and all of those sorts of things. So do you see dating as something you would do lifelong until potentially you meet somebody? Or is there a point where you would say, cool, I think I've done this. I'm not actively going to be seeking to meet somebody?
It's a good question. I have absolutely no idea, to be honest. I'm not good at looking that far ahead, and I really try to keep my focus on what's God doing today. He's going to give me the strength I need for today, and then he's going to guide me. If there's a change I need to make tomorrow, then, I'll be praying about that, and he will show me at the right time. So I guess I just need to trust that he'll lead me in that as the time comes.
Yeah, day by day seems to be the kind of moral of the story here. But also I think recognizing our own awkwardness in the process of dating can be super liberating. Reading your words about flirting, particularly as somebody, I also grew up in youth group. I was there with the I kiss dating goodbye, all of the rules about, we don't talk to boys, let alone touch them or have any, flirting just felt so unallowed, right? And yet it's this really key way that you have a bit of fun with people and build connection and just help people relax in what can feel like this very serious thing. How have you dealt with that dynamic of flirting coming from a Christian ecosystem that can already make it really challenging and awkward to then now being an adult, full-blown adult woman in the dating world trying to connect with people? Where does flirting fit into the equation?
Have I dealt with it? That's a good question. Look, I think if I had grown up in the most flirt-friendly environment, I still would have been bad at it. It's my personality type as much as it is my environment. But I think admitting it is useful, and also just doing a bit of reading out there, talking to other people, finding out things. I was reading books on dating the other day, and they were just talking about the importance of eye contact. And I had this huge realization that I do not make enough eye contact with people. And I've started practicing that. So I think being open to learning and trying new things, but also recognizing what you are and embracing that as well. If I'm a little awkward, then if I am just comfortable in that and embrace it and joke about it, then I think that's going to lead to a better outcome than trying to become someone else.
One of the good things about dating when you're a little bit older, I think, is that you do become more comfortable saying, I'm really uncomfortable with this, or you're more willing to admit, I find, those things where you can say, I'm really bad at this, but I think this or this or this, whatever. I don't know, there seems to be less inhibition to admitting to some of the things that maybe as a teenager, maybe in your early 20s, you feel like you've got to cover it all up, whereas 30s is a little liberating, I think.
It is, and you've just had the opportunity to go on a few more dates, even online dates with people that you might be like, look, I don't know that there's much chance this is going to go very far, but look, at least we'll have a nice lunch or something and get used to talking to different people. The value in practice, and that's one of the things that I Kiss Dating Goodbye was not great about. People lost their opportunity to practice and to meet all different sorts of folks. And some guys I've gone and had, dinner with or something, they were so nervous, they couldn't look me in the eye at all.
Yeah.
And I recognized that was happening, and I was just like, cool, dude, this is going to be good because the next girl you're going to take out, you're going to be a little bit more comfortable with.
Yeah.
And so I knew that it was a good experience for the both of us. That would have helped us both, even if it didn't lead to anything permanent.
As women too, I think we can forget that guys can be nervous in this experience too. I don't know where it comes from, but I think we can often assume that guys are really confident in dating. They know what they're doing. They're leading the charge, whatever. And probably a lot of that comes from generalized stereotypes and all sorts of things. But I found it really important your story there reminded me to actually go, guys are nervous here too. They don't know what they're doing. Not in every situation. It's not just the girls who are like, will they like me,
Yeah, I think guys feel it a lot more deeply than sometimes we give them credit for.
I'm glad as well that you acknowledge that in this whole conversation around singleness and marriage and wanting people to find joy and contentment in singleness, sometimes people feel the risk of, if I'm too happy in my singleness, if I get too content in this situation, I may never marry. It may never happen. What are your thoughts around addressing that kind of dynamic that can sometimes present itself?
I think if you are letting that hold you back from seeking contentment, then, which I have to say is really common. When I started out this journey, that was probably a thought that floated through my mind. What if I become too happy and then I just stay like this?
Mm.
That is the enemy trying to stop you from finding, your joy now. He's afraid of how close you're going to get to God and how you're going to encourage other people and how your faith is going to grow. And if you do find your joy, then I think that makes you so much more likely to actually end up in a healthy relationship. So I would say don't let that hold you back at all. And also, I mean, if you end up so contented and joyful that you're like, you know what, I'm actually great how I am, that's a wonderful story.
Mm. Yeah, yeah.
There's a lot in the Bible to say that that is a really good choice. And both Jesus and Paul really talked about supporting people who, if that's what they wanted, then that was fantastic. The focus that they could put on God was a beautiful thing. So I think it's something that we should embrace a little bit more. But if you like, I'm not one of those people. I want to get married very much, but I'm going to get every bit of joy between now and then that I can.
And joy doesn't have to be something passive. You can have joy and work toward complete joy, having that in your singleness, but also still be really proactive about going on dates. And it's sort of, I want to make sure people know it's not like contentment equals laziness.
Yeah.
It's like contentment just gives you a strong foundation to be proactive from.
100%. Yeah. The Bible never says that we just, sit and someone magically shows up. In fact, it doesn't talk about the method of finding someone really at all.
Really frustratingly.
Yes, that would have maybe been a little bit useful. But think about any other area of our life. If you lost your job and you needed to find a new one, are you going to sit in your house and wait for a job to show up on your doorstep? Or are you going to go and look for one and talk to people and go online and different things? You're going to be, no one would say that wasn't trusting God. You were trusting God while you were proactive to find your new job. So if we would apply that approach to our income, then why would we not apply it to our spouse?
Yeah, another difficult mentality that we sometimes can have is this feeling of, I want others more than me, right? If you're the person in dating who constantly feels like you're rejected, or, you make a first move and it's not really reciprocated, couple that with all of my efforts are worthless. Even if I try, I'm not going to get this. What do you do when those feelings come up?
I think that's when you've really got to go into battle. Paul uses really strong language when he talks about, lies that are around us and just accepting thoughts and messages from culture. And he uses words like fight, smash, demolish, take captive. We need to catch those thoughts, recognize that they are being sent our way for our destruction, not for our building up. And, send them to God to be dealt with. Replace that vacuum with his truth, because it's only there to hurt you, and there's just something so much better for you out there.
And we always get the answer to our questions of why hasn't it happened yet, or how do we deal with these things with you've just got to trust God's timing, that lovely word of timing, that'll all happen in his time. That is encouraging and frustrating all at the same time, because again, it hits on one of those unknowns of how do we align ourselves with the timing of God, and when will that timing of God be? When it comes around that timing narrative, a lot of us can feel really stressed, like we're running out of time. If you want to spend, your life married to somebody, having a family, all of these sorts of things, it can feel like you have a time crunch. So how do you trust God's timing when it feels like, as humans, we have a finite amount?
Yeah, we do. And the biological clock is real. So it's not something that we're imagining. It's not something that, if we just choose to feel happy about this, all that big problem's going to go away. It's a real thing that needs to be acknowledged and dealt with. But when the Bible talks about peace and joy, Paul tells us, often writing from jail, by the way, so very much talking about joy amongst difficult circumstances. He tells us that instead of worrying, we need to pray. And so I have just this year really been, even after writing the devotional, realized how much more literally I need to take that. And, I would worry a bit. So I'd be like, all right, I'll say a prayer. And then I'd go back to worrying. I'm like, no, every time you catch yourself worrying, even if you're doing it every second, turn it into a prayer until that worry stops. There is an active battle that we need to fight with this. And it may not fix your biological clock situation, but it will give you peace in the meantime. And you can still be doing that while proactively seeing if you can find a solution, but having peace in that uncertainty. And it's just such a good witness for God, because peace in uncertainty is something our culture does not do well. It makes you stand out. So it is really worth pursuing for your own sake, but also for the sake of everybody who can see you doing it.
And I want to acknowledge the men in this conversation here as well, because even just this week, I was reading how while the biological clock is something that is very female focused, and of course women will be more aware of it than men, there is increasing awareness that men also have a fertile window where they are in their prime of life for having children, and that also does fade as they get a little bit older. And even this week, I was chatting with some guys in their late 20s, and they're kind of concerned going, once I hit 30, the quality, and right into the nitty gritty of this, they were like, the quality of my sperm begins to decrease the moment I hit 30. And they were really concerned about it. So I feel like we spend so much attention on the women, and fine, but there are also some really concerned guys out there thinking, hey, I'm losing, my physical prime is also passing.
Yep. And I mean, I guess they just need to do the same thing, that trust in uncertainty, and go out there and ask some girls on some dates, guys.
Yeah, be brave, be kind. I also want to ask you about the role of auntie that you play, because that, for a lot of single women and men, there are a lot of kids, there can be a lot of kids in our lives. There's a really beautiful page where you write a letter to your nibblings, which I learned is the collective term for nieces and nephews, and I just want to share that with everybody.
I did not know this was a word.
It was the best word ever. So minor thought sidetrack that we all need to call nieces and nephews nibblings now, but you wrote a letter to them about what their future could look like. What are your hopes for them in their beliefs and experiences around dating?
Yeah, I really enjoyed doing that letter. It was really about thinking, if they grow up and they are single for a little bit longer than they expect to be, how do I hope that they handle it? And, it's one thing when you look at yourself and how you're handling your singleness, it's so easy to let yourself get discouraged and spiral into those lies. But if I think about my 4-year-old niece in 30 years, perhaps being in the position that I'm in now, I don't want that for her. I want her to stand on God's promises, to know how incredibly loved she is, all that jazz. And I can't stand the thought of her listening to any of these lies saying that, there's something that she's not lovable or anything like that, because she is wholly and completely loved from the top of her head to her tiny little toes. And if I think that for her, then I need to realize that God is thinking that for me. And also, my parents are thinking that for me. There are other people in my life looking at me that way. So it really helps when you reframe it for someone that you love. We're so much harder on ourselves than on the people that we love.
Yeah, certainly the next generation, I think, are going to have such different messaging around dating, the value of singleness, that it's okay for all of these different kind of life options to be ones that they choose, where previous generations have been much more narrow in what life and family life had to look like.
It will be interesting. I think that the birth rate crisis will also have an interesting impact on culture too. We may see a pushback that swings the other way because we realize our economies are going to collapse, and still, unless some people start having some babies.
Go out and procreate. Is that what we're telling everyone to do right now?
Well, I think it'll be interesting just how people end up viewing things, and we may just get more extremes on both ends. But whatever culture is doing, it doesn't change what the truth is, and that's always a comforting thought.
And that hunger for nearness to God is something in the Christian life we're pursuing through all different seasons. But in singleness specifically, if you're thinking about obedience to God, wanting nearness to Him, following His plan in this kind of time, what do you think that looks like during your window or your life of singleness?
Yeah, I think there's a few different ways. There is your own thought life and how you're thinking about yourself and bringing that into alignment with God, not letting yourself just accept these lies and spiral into discouragement, but also using this time and opportunities to be obedient in other ways. We are called to spread God's word. We have more time to do that when we're single. We might have different opportunities than those who are married have. And sometimes as a single, it feels like the married people actually have more opportunities in that area. It depends on your perspective. Both camps are probably looking at each other thinking the same thing, to be honest. But I think praying through, God, where is there an opportunity here for me? And it may not be a big flashing neon sign. It may be just going and volunteering in something very unglamorous. The Bible actually does not talk very much about flashing neon signs of here is your great, glorious mission. It talks a lot about very unglamorous serving and humility around working with people that the world considers to be the least important. So I would say have a look around, see where you get a chance to join in with that. And in praying with God and being open to his leading, just get in and start being obedient. And it may not look like anything too exciting at first, but obedience always leads to being closer to God, to opportunities you didn't expect. Who knows where it will go.
I have two questions I want to ask you as we finish up. One of them is on behalf of the single 30-something guys. I was speaking with one of my friends when I knew I was doing this interview. I was like, what do you want me to ask you on behalf of the guys, right? And he was talking about his experience in church is that as a single guy, you become, sort of the one that everyone wants to matchmake with all of these single women who are looking for their guy. And if you say no, or you're sort of not interested in being matchmade, there's this assumption that, oh, you don't want to be happy then. You obviously don't want, your life to go down that path, and then why? What would you say to that person having that experience?
I think if they can have a think about how they can communicate with their friends about what they are looking for, what is helpful to them. So if they say, you know what, I'm kind of in a space where I feel like I'll know her when I see her, and, thanks for offering to matchmake me, but I'm not really feeling that right now, then I would say just have a little line that you've practiced so that you can communicate it in an easy way. And some people might love being in that position and some people may not. It probably depends on your personality and how you like to date, and that feeling of being the only one and all these single girls maybe looking at you every week. You might feel a bit like a deer in headlights and that you just want to back off a bit, because I can see from the guy's perspective, so this is the tricky thing, to go back to our kiss dating goodbye, is like half of the Christian world's still operating in that mind space. Half of them have moved on to, you know what, it's good to just go on some low pressure dates with lots of different people. But if you're the one single guy and you've gone on low pressure dates with all 15 single women in your church, people may talk.
Yeah. But Jessica, it has been such a delight chatting with you, and I encourage everybody to take a look at the book, Why Are All My Boyfriends Fictional, because there is daily devotionals in there, lots of thoughts and challenges that you deal with. Are there any final thoughts that you wanted to bring to the table before we wrap it up?
Oh, look, just that I want to see single women who are faithfully single but scandalously confident. That is what God has in store for you, bold, confident, working in his army. So can't wait to see that happening.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Undistracted. If there is a fellow single that you want to share it with, make sure you pass it along. And until next time, enjoy living this undistracted life.